April 25, 1986. To the people living in the Soviet Union, it was just another ordinary spring evening. In the quiet city of Pripyat, families were enjoying dinner, children were playing outside, and workers were preparing for another routine night shift. Just a few kilometers away stood the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, one of the largest and most important nuclear facilities in the Soviet Union. It supplied electricity to millions of people and symbolized the country's technological strength. Among its 4 nuclear reactors, Reactor No. 4 was scheduled for what seemed like a routine safety test. The purpose of the test was simple. Engineers wanted to find out whether, in the event of a power failure, the spinning turbine could continue generating enough electricity for a short time until the emergency diesel generators came online. It was a test that had been attempted before but never completed successfully. As the evening turned into night, a new team of operators took over the control room. They followed standard procedures, reviewed instructions, and began preparing Reactor No. 4 for the test. To everyone involved, it appeared to be just another shift. No one in that control room could have imagined that within a few hours, a series of small decisions, combined with design flaws hidden inside the reactor itself, would trigger the worst nuclear disaster in human history. What began as an ordinary night was about to change the world forever. As midnight passed, the long-delayed safety test finally began. To prepare for the experiment, operators gradually reduced Reactor No. 4's power. But things didn't go as planned. The reactor's power dropped far lower than expected, leaving it in an unstable condition. Determined to continue the test, the operators took a series of actions to restore power. Several automatic safety systems were disabled, and too many control rods were withdrawn from the reactor, steps that violated standard operating procedures. What the crew didn't fully realize was that the RBMK reactor had a dangerous design flaw. At very low power levels, the reactor became highly unstable. Instead of calming the nuclear reaction, certain conditions could cause it to increase rapidly. At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, the safety test officially began. Within seconds, reactor power surged uncontrollably. Warning alarms sounded throughout the control room as operators struggled to understand what was happening. In a desperate attempt to stop the reaction, the emergency shutdown button, known as AZ5, was pressed. But instead of shutting the reactor down immediately, a flaw in the control rod design briefly increased the nuclear reaction even further. The reactor's power skyrocketed in just a few seconds. Then, a massive steam explosion ripped through Reactor No. 4. Blowing apart the 2,000-ton concrete and steel reactor lid. Only moments later, a second, even more powerful explosion shattered the building, sending radioactive graphite, fuel, and debris high into the night sky. The roof was torn open. Fires broke out across the plant, and an invisible cloud of radioactive material began drifting into the atmosphere. What had started as a routine safety test had become the worst nuclear disaster in human history. Just minutes after the explosions, emergency alarms echoed across the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. From the nearby city of Pripyat, firefighters rushed toward the scene. To them, it looked like an ordinary industrial fire. None of them had been warned that the reactor had exploded, or that deadly levels of radiation were pouring into the air. Without protective suits or radiation equipment, they climbed onto burning rooftops and battled flames with nothing more than hoses and determination. Many picked up strange black fragments scattered around the plant, unaware that they were pieces of highly radioactive reactor graphite. Simply standing near them exposed the firefighters to enormous doses of radiation. Inside the plant, engineers and operators desperately tried to understand what had happened. Communication was chaotic, and many still believed the reactor itself was intact. They worked to restore cooling systems, isolate damaged equipment, and prevent the disaster from spreading further. But the true scale of the catastrophe was still unknown. Meanwhile, an invisible enemy was escaping into the atmosphere. A massive plume of radioactive particles rose high above Reactor No. 4, carried by the wind across Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and eventually much of Europe. Unlike smoke or fire, radiation had no color, no smell, and no warning signs. Within hours, many firefighters and plant workers began experiencing severe symptoms of acute radiation exposure. They suffered intense nausea, vomiting, dizziness, and painful burns unlike anything they had seen before. Some collapsed while still carrying out rescue efforts. As dawn broke over Chernobyl, the fires were slowly coming under control, but the nuclear disaster was only beginning. The first heroes had already made an unimaginable sacrifice, and the world still had no idea that one of history's worst environmental catastrophes was unfolding.